What's up, my vengeful listeners? Welcome to Daily Dose of Reddit. I'm your host, not Captain Zach, and today's subreddit is r/ProRevenge. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell to never miss an episode. This story's called Don't Lead Her, Folks. You might find yourself at the receiving end of my devious father. This was many years ago, when I was around 23 years ago. So it's more about my father instead. This does contain some mild vandalism, so here is hoping it doesn't get removed. My house was on the lower class side of town, mostly of more poor folks and retirees who had lived there before it went downhill. Our backyard butted right up against an alleyway that was a constant source of problems. As an example, we had a 15-foot diameter trampoline stolen from our backyard. This thing had been rusted together, so I can only figure they popped it up on its side and rolled it away like a big tire. Anyways, back to the story. The house across the alley from us was a duplex kind of thing, and the landlord would rent to literally anyone. One guy he rented to was a fairly prolific drug dealer who ran his gig literally out of his kitchen window. Cars would pull up through the alley, into the yard/parking, hands would move back and forth, then the car would drive away. This guy legit had a drug drive-through. It didn't take long for my parents to find all kinds of undesirable trash migrating its way into our yard. Needles, burnt spoons, broken pipes, condoms, and who knows what else. My parents were worried about my dumb 5-year-old booty getting into something or stabbing myself with something that could decidedly harm me. My mother was a nurse before being disabled in a severe car accident and had been infected with hepatitis C while working at the hospital due to a needle that had been missed. So she was super worried about this for me, as well as a handful of other kids in the neighborhood. Conversations with the landlord, including gathered evidence, made no difference. He didn't live there. Why did he care? Eventually, my parents tried to call the cops. The local police department was not helpful. They said they couldn't investigate or even send out a car on someone's word. This wasn't our first problem with the local cops either. After having our cars and other things broken into or stolen, they told my parents to write down license plate numbers, and if any matches a known felon or someone with a warrant, they would investigate. So my mother sat at a window for a full day and wrote down every plate she could see, hiding carefully the whole time. She ended the day with over 100 plates. That's how busy this guy was. We faxed, remember 90s, the numbers along with a letter explaining what the numbers were for and who he had spoken to with the police department. Nothing happened. After several weeks, they called back, and we were told there were no matches of any kind. After another week of the problem simply getting worse, my father decides to take matters into his own hands. One night, with no moon, he sneaks into the driveway and throws roofing nails he had bought the previous day all over their area. Hundreds of them. We watched for weeks as seemingly every tweaker in town would stop and almost immediately have to fix flats. Evidently, either business dwindled so much or the renter figured out someone was messing with them, or both. They finally moved out. The landlord spent over 2 weeks of having cleaning crews and the like over, throwing out huge mounds of garbage, and repair crews to fix damage that I later found out was caused by the renter. It seems they trashed and stripped the place before disappearing some night without us noticing. The moral here? Not really one exactly, except for maybe the landlord. Be more selective who you let live in your house, maybe? Edit. I should clarify the driveway was dirt, gravel, and tufts of grass. So those nails were not obvious and were very difficult to see, let alone pick up. My father specifically bought brown-colored ones. Wow, that is not somewhere I would like living. Yeah, that's terrifying. Dirty needles are a huge fear of mine. Holy crap. And did the police follow protocol at all? Because I don't think they did. Were they just lazy or what? Let my uneducated butt know in the comments below. This story's called I Catfished One of My High School Teachers Because He Was Bullying Me. I was told to post this here. This happened a while ago. Some background. He knew my dad because my dad, a lawyer, had represented his ex-wife several years before in a super bitter divorce. For some reason, he took out that frustration on me. He would verbally assault me in front of class, If I raised my hand to answer a question, he would roll his eyes before calling on me and loudly say to class, "Listen to what OP says. That way you will know what the wrong answers are." He would criticize my work, make comments about how I'll never amount to much because obviously I have a learning disability. I don't. He was just being a prick. I would often get marked down for penmanship, but after asking some classmates, apparently I was the only one being graded on that. I know history wasn't my best subject, but the way I was being treated was totally uncalled for. I began to have anxiety to go to that class. I would dread it all day. My friends would even mention casually, "Yeah, Mr. Smith doesn't really like OP. What did you do to him, bro?" My dad was angry that he was obviously being biased towards me for something I had nothing to do with. Dad made noise and tried to get me moved into another class, but the district and school were over capacity as it was. I couldn't move classes without displacing another student, and the school didn't think that would be fair to the other student. But it's fair to me to let this keep going on because you can't move me? Now, my dad never discussed details of his cases, but I overheard him angrily telling my mom, after our meeting with the principal, that he didn't like that I'm in that freaking child fans class. An idea was planted in my head, and it started to grow. I devised a plan. I gathered social media pics of a girl who was underage and went to another school, and made some profiles on Kik and WhatsApp using a Google Voice number from our city. I changed her name for obvious reasons. Once I had him hooked on the made-up 17-year-old girl, I sent all the chat logs and pics he sent to her to the principal and the school district main office using every email address I could find on the school district website and social media pages. Within 3 days of the emails being sent, we had a sub. All we were told was that Mr. Smith had to take some time off due to personal issues. I still don't know what happened to him after that. I graduated about 3 months after he was put on leave and never heard from or saw him again. I joined the military and left town about 6 months after this all happened, and have not returned to that city since. One of my friends, who still lives there, told me a while back he saw him working the deli counter at a grocery store not far from the high school. I never told a single soul, and nobody knows it was me. The rumor mill went wild about him being a child lover, but nobody knew I had anything to do with it, even though I benefited the most from his departure. I imagine they tracked the girl down and asked her, but she obviously didn't know him. However, the chat logs from WhatsApp show the girl telling him she was 17 about 3 days before he sent the first of many pictures of his junk. So that was probably enough to at least get him fired and lose his teaching certificate. I don't regret it, but I would never go so far on anyone again. I was a bitter, moody teen. But when you're being bullied by someone with authority over you, you have to do what you have to do to survive. Okay, I think, now I'm no legal expert and I don't know what state he's in, but I'm pretty sure you could sue the school for conflict of interest because that's completely messed up. And yeah, I'm pretty sure you could at least do something about that legally. And given that the dude's dad is a lawyer, I'm surprised they didn't do that. I mean, I know a divorce lawyer is different from whatever lawyer would be needed for this, but still, let me know in the comments below if I'm right or if I'm stupid. Because I know for a fact that like with state testing, like the standardized test you get every year, there's been times when I was in school, like with the standardized tests that you'd get every year, where my classmates have been the children of teachers that would normally supervise, but the teacher would have to be substituted because, you know, like I said, conflict of interest of a different nature, but still. This story's called I Get the Ultimate Revenge on an Identity Thief. Long post. To set the stage, it was 2005 and I was living on my own. Had a girlfriend, my own apartment, and a paid-off used car. I was working as the assistant manager of a gas station. I made decent money for the time and was living comfortably, but I was far from being rich. My younger brother, Kyle, was living with me at the time. He had serious behavioral problems, oppositional defiance disorder, ADHD, etc., some of which were due to a shared rough upbringing, a serious mistreatment. He had nowhere to go as the rest of my family refused to deal with him. In their defense, he did lie, cheat, and steal on a daily basis and had a drug habit. He even broke my arm deliberately once. I was trying to do the right thing and get him on track. I got him a job and would take him to work, gave him some money, and allowed him to live rent-free. The rules were simple. I didn't care if he smoked weed, but it wouldn't be in my apartment. Drugs would not cross into my apartment. One day I decided to surprise my girlfriend with 9 Inch Nails tickets at the Tabernacle in Atlanta for her birthday. They were her favorite band. I had planned this months in advance and ended up working a double shift the night of the concert and driving down there due to some sudden personnel issues at work. When I got back the following morning, which I had off, I stopped by my work to make sure there were no more sudden schedule changes. My boss, Betty Jo, saw me and had a look on her face I had only seen the day she got robbed. I knew it was bad. She sat me down and explained that Kyle had tried to get a ride to a spot in town that was notorious for selling drugs. Kyle admitted he was trying to sell a significant quantity of weed and coke to a coworker, which could have cost me my job. I got up and peeled out in the parking lot, headed for home, which was literally 40 seconds away. He broke the rules. He knew it was the only way to get immediately removed. It was even in writing because I made him sign a letter stating the rules. So I ejected him from the apartment that day despite his protests. Fast forward 4 months. He would call me occasionally and update me on how he was doing. He said he got a new job making a ton of money. I congratulated him. I was saving money since kicking him out. I didn't pay attention to my balance as I keep running a tally in my head. My girlfriend decided we should go to the beach for the weekend as I had a rare weekend off. I went to withdraw $300 so we could have a blast. Insufficient funds. I thought there has to be an error, so I tried again. Same error. Went home and checked my bank statement. I was over $9,500 shy of where I should have been. I checked my statements. There were huge cash withdrawals every day up to the maximum allowed limit, day after day after day. $900 at AT&T, an astronomical sum at the time, hundreds of dollars at liquor stores, clothes, dozens of transactions I never made, etc. I printed my statements and went directly to the large regional branch. I was told it was definitely identity theft, and that it's unusual because it was in the north of my town. I was told that to get anything back, I had to turn the investigation over to the bank, so I did. A few days later, I got a call from the officer investigating. He asked me to meet. He had a stack of printed photos almost a foot high, as every transaction on an ATM takes a picture. "Do you know this guy?" I informed the detective it was Kyle. Investigator told me Kyle had the money to evade police for a long time if he desired, and no stable address or job to be picked up at, so it would be a long shot at finding him. I told my buddy, Rick, from here on out, what happened. Rick was a gruff 6'4" Native American man who was well-muscled from a life of hard labor. Rick was a good person, but if you screwed with him or his friends, he was devious and loved scorched earth tactics. You didn't bring small problems to him. He immediately offered to help. We became friends after I found out he was sleeping with Betty Jo, who was a little person, 4'8" in heels. He came into the store and I started laughing because the mental image was too much. He said, "What are you smiling at?" Gay slur. We were friends ever since. Now, Kyle loved Rick, despite the fact that Rick was a massive booty hole to him on a regular basis. Kyle wanted his approval desperately. We concocted a plan. He would call Kyle, get him to come over under the guise that I had a falling out with Rick over the way I treated Kyle. Naturally, Kyle ate the story hook, line, and sinker. Kyle gave Rick an address to meet, an abandoned car wash in the north of town. We loaded up his truck. The trap was set. Rick hops out of the truck and tells Kyle to get in. I was laying down in the front seat so he couldn't see me. He opens the door and I put him in a headlock and pull him in. We go back to Rick's place while my brother visibly sweats and even cries at some point. We cooked him dinner and calmly sat down, ate, and then cleaned up. The entire time, Kyle had convinced himself he was about to get murdered in the woods. We gave him a chance to explain himself. Naturally, as was his way, he lied, denied, and swore on everyone living and dead he had nothing to do with it. I grabbed a stack of photos from the investigator and silently slid them across the table. Again, he denied everything. "This was a setup! You're trying to make me a felon! I did nothing wrong!" I had enough. I called the non-emergency number and the police came to pick him up. We said he showed up unexpectedly and started to get violent. When they searched him, he had Oxycontin, a felony, and he tried to assault me in front of the officer, screaming about how we set him up and all of this was unjust. He ended up getting arrested on something like 350 felonies as every transaction crossed state lines. This was pled down to 1 or 2 felonies. Kyle ended up getting 5 years with early release and 3. I think this was because, despite his checkered past, family never pressed charges, so his record was clean. He has been in and out of 5-star luxury federal resorts ever since, for such wonderful things as the manufacturing and distribution of meth, child endangerment, theft, etc. I ended up getting a full refund. Man, that's gotta be rough. You know, to give someone a chance that no one else wants anything to do with and they just backstab you like that. That guy needs therapy or something, I don't know, but that's really sad. But it seems this dude's, more or less content with it. I've had similar family troubles, but thankfully they've worked out and everyone's more or less happy now. But, things like this are kind of rough. I'm curious, let me know in the comments below about you guys. Have you guys had something like this happen in your family? I don't know, I'm interested in seeing who can relate with who, Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell to never miss an episode.